Hello everybody, welcome back to another Space Engineers video. I am Ferocious Twinkie and today we're going to be talking about fleets. That's right, how can you build an effective ship fleet for combat within your multiplayer server, and how can you and your friends effectively take over entire planets with a well-balanced fleet of not just battleships, but of other ships capable of performing many other types of roles, more complicated roles, and being able to do more jobs within battle that will certainly help you take over your opponent. So, without further ado, let's get into the ship classes that exist within space. So, there are 7 different types of ship classes that I can think of that exist within space. However, there are technically only 6 because 2 of those classes are almost the same thing. We will get to that here in just a minute. So, the very first class I'm going to say is a Corvette. Then there's destroyers, frigates, cruisers, dreadnoughts, battleships, and carriers. Those are the 7 ship classes that exist within space that are meant for war. So, without further ado, let's get into the very first ship. So up first, guys, we got the very first ship of the fleet. It's the smallest one. It is the weakest one. It has the lowest firepower, but trust me, guys, hear me out. It does have some good stuff. It is nonetheless the Corvette. Now, the Corvette, while weak and low firepower, they are fast, they are nimble, and their small profile makes them harder to hit. And on top of that, due to their small size, they are cheap, and therefore they can easily be mass-produced. Now, within the current Navy, Corvettes are built more for a modular type of job. They can be retrofitted to do whatever needs to be done, whether it be carrying helicopters for search and rescue teams, to scouting, to fitting with a few extra weapons, primarily meant for battle. Now, I believe that a Corvette within space is meant more for a type of interceptive role or a type of control. Now, let's say, I have played a few roleplay servers. They're hard to find, but they are out there. They're quite a bit of fun. And what Corvettes were used, what I saw their uses for being, was police. They were small, but they were able to be mass-produced, and they did have enough firepower to where they could easily control an area with a certain amount of force. They would patrol cities, as well as they patrol the outskirts of planets, and they were guarding, small stations, basically keeping everybody in check, and, it was interesting to see. Now, quite frankly, a more combative role, if you get them up into small groups, I think that they would be absolutely brutal. It'd be the equivalent of going after a bunch of fighters in a small ship. It's not going to be pretty, guys. It's not. They will rip you apart. So, it's basically the job of a Corvette. Now, due to the low profiles, they are excellent for scouts, because they'll be fast, hard to catch, and hard to see because they're so small, they're hard to notice. You can make them all gray to blend in with asteroids, or to make it look like an asteroid, like a small one, or you can even make it all black to fade in with the dark abyss that is space. And that's what I do with all my ships within Delta Fleet. They are all a reflective, shiny black, primarily to avoid being seen. So, basically, that is pretty much the Corvette. It's not much. It's probably like the first warship I would say you could probably build on a survival world. It's definitely the weakest, and I would say it's not one that's entirely practical, but it does have its use. So up next, everybody, is the Destroyer. Personally, my favorite type of ship, and we'll get into the reasons why. So, the Destroyer, currently used within the United States Navy within World War II, was primarily meant to escort larger ships by destroying submarines or corvettes, and as well as aircraft. It basically would destroy anything that was small that would be very dangerous to the larger ships, such as like a battleship or a carrier. Now, destroyers out in space would be a little bit different, because I'm pretty sure that the current ships that we build in Space Engineers, I'm pretty sure that all the ships would be able to do that quite easily. I'm pretty sure that the carrier has taken over the job of destroying the small targets, and I'm pretty sure there's no submarines or a type of submarine in space. I'm pretty sure they're all submarines. I don't think that there's any sub-level of space that they can use to somehow undetectedly get beneath you and smack you from there. There's no, it's space. It's a wide open void that is infinitely dense while infinitely empty while infinitely cold and hot and craziness. It's space. So I don't know how the submarine job would work. Now I think that destroyers within space engineers would serve a much different role. So the way I like to build my destroyers is with a forward-facing cannon. Now it's typically the largest attribute about them. It takes up about a third to half of the entire ship. If you've seen my build the Dresden or if you've seen the Berlin, I do have a video on the Berlin. If you haven't seen it yet, please go check it out. It is a really cool ship. It is available on Steam if you want to go play around with it. And do tell me its weaknesses or not, whatnot. I am looking to make it better. Anyways, so now the destroyers with the forward-facing cannon can have up to, well, basically two jobs. First job would be sniping. So it would basically sit at the very far back, look for the largest enemy target or the biggest problem it is facing, and it would give its other ships covering fire by neutralizing that large target. It would essentially destroy the ship. And I'd say it should do a very good job of it. I mean, you're talking about basically a giant cannon with thrusters. That's basically what a destroyer would be. Another job it would be useful for is ambushing. If you hide behind a rock or disguise yourself as a rock, they come up to you, they don't suspect you, and then use a forward-facing cannon to absolutely smack them. You know, it's good for ambushing, and I'd say it's, well, I don't know exactly what else to go off here. It could be useful for hit and runs, but I would say it's more useful for basically just giving other ships cover fire and taking out large targets, dealing damage to large targets. It's basically meant to throw damage downrange to a specific person without getting hit itself. Now it does sound a lot like a battleship, but I'll get to that here in a little bit, and we'll see the difference between the two. So, without further ado, let's get into the next ship. So up next, everybody, is a frigate. Now, frigates are fast, they're nimble, not quite to the level of corvettes, but they have a lot more firepower and a bit more durable. These things are good for hit and runs, intercepting targets, as well as basically being a blockade runner if you ever need that. So, you know, I might be making a few skits with my siblings about this ship, because I did find a few little funny little things I can do with it. But basically, it's a really aggressive ship. It runs up to its targets, deals what damage it needs to, and then it leaves. And then it circles back around and does it again. It uses its combination of speed and firepower to cause havoc and chaos to multiple ships. And like I said before, it is also used to intercept other ships. So I guess you could say, you could also call a frigate within space an interceptor if you really wanted. So that's basically a frigate. There's not much of anything too special about it. It's just really freaking fast. So, they're just larger corvettes, pretty much, is what I can figure out. And they're able to hold themselves in battle a lot longer due to their more firepower and due to the fact that they can have more armor to them. And they're easy to be produced on a large scale. I wouldn't say mass produced, but they can certainly be produced on a decently large scale. And they can also be used for scouting because of their speed. However, they're more noticeable than a Corvette, so I would say it's not the go-to scout, but it's definitely it definitely can fill that role if it needs to, because it will be able to hold its own if detected more than a Corvette. However, it would just not be able to run away like a Corvette. Now, within the current United States Navy, their ships sound like they have a lot of the same jobs. And a frigate, it's basically a destroyer that's meant to go after other ships. That's what a current frigate is within the Navy that I could tell. It's nothing too special. So I think the frigates within space, the job that I think that it can be used for it here, is definitely one that's a lot more useful, because due to its speed and its aggressive nature, it could definitely be the one to distract your enemy far more than any other ship could for far longer, because it does pose a larger threat, and therefore it's going to have your enemy's attention far more, allowing your battleships or your other heavier ships to move in easier. However, I think that the frigate's probably going to be the one to be smacked. I'm going to say second to most, next to the battleship. We'll get to that one here in a little bit. Now, cruisers, I would say, are probably the most useful within a combat situation due to the fact that they are the jack of all trades. However, they are the master of none. But they do come within some different type, well, at least 3 different types of subclasses. You have the light, the heavy, and then the battle. So basically, light and heavy. The light one's just faster. It leans more towards being a frigate. Or I would say it's probably the standard one, due to its fact that it is faster. However, it's less armor. The firepower can probably be the same between light and heavy. It's just one's faster than the other, and the other is a lot more tanky than the other. So that's basically the difference between light and heavy. Now, a battle cruiser is something that lies in between that of the light or heavy cruiser and in between the battleship. It is right down there in the middle. It has a lot more firepower. They're typically a little bit bigger, but they're still fast. They just don't have enough firepower to basically be considered a battleship. They're just enough to be considered a cruiser. So it'd be a battle cruiser. Well, more firepower than what a cruiser would have, but less than what a battleship would have. It basically fills in that gap. So if you don't want a battleship, if you have a very aggressive fleet that's all about speed and aggression and getting up in people's faces, I think perhaps maybe due to the lack of speed a battleship has, I think a battle cruiser would be much more efficient. However, let's get in a little more in depth with the others. So all of these, somewhat more or less, the cruiser is basically the middleman of all attributes, and the different types of cruisers simply enables more or less for them to be meant for more specific roles. Lights, it's slower, meaner frigate, basically. It's not meant to draw attention to itself, but it is meant to quickly get into a situation and quickly get out, or quickly go into an area, create a situation, and then get out. So, and it's much more of a support role. I don't know exactly how, but speaking with some of the people that I've been talking to, some of my teammates, that's what we've all agreed to call the cruiser. It's basically a support role. So you can do this by having several rebuild systems on it, or several utility ships, or just a few utility ships. But I think it'd basically be meant for cover fire, drawing attention, as well as be useful for scouting, and they can be spread out quite a bit throughout the system, because they're a far more independent ship, and they require a lot less backup than, let's say, a frigate or a destroyer or even a Corvette would need. Because let's face it, guys, a Corvette would need a lot more other Corvettes or another ship to be with it at the bare least. So, you know, it's definitely that one this is where we finally get in the spot where ships can actually hold their own and actually stand a chance of fighting against the larger ships. This is the very first one that we're going to get into that can actually do that, but also one that can go up against a whole fleet of smaller ships and still be able to hold its own. So essentially, these different classes allow for a more diverse fleet, capable of doing more specific tasks. However, like I said, I would say that, light or heavy, it's basically the same thing, just one's tankier than the other, and battle is basically just a much more aggressive type of cruiser. So that's what I got for you guys on this one. Up next, guys, we have everyone's favorite. It is the battleship. Now, also known as brigs of the line, dreadnoughts, warships. Well, they're all battleships, essentially. That's right, guys. A dreadnought and a battleship is actually pretty much the same thing, given current Space Engineers specs and standards, compared to that of the Navy of World War II and today. They're the same thing. Well, World War I and World War II, they're the same thing. And today. So, battleships, they're big, heavy, slow, but they're powerful. They have a huge gap in firepower between themselves and the cruisers. I mean, even, for example, the USS Iowa or the Missouri of today's naval power alone would make up 1/3 to a quarter. These two individually would make up 1/3 to a quarter of the US's naval power, according to a few old sailors I know, as well as, well, a couple of sources out there. But that is if they were to be, you know, retrofitted and brought back into service. They're not going to do that, sadly, because the cost of fuel. I mean, it's literally going to take World War III for us to see those two battleships again. It's kind of depressing. Anyways, they're built out of primarily nothing but heavy armor. So, and they tank a lot of shots. They're armed with a ridiculous amount of firepower, large guns, and, you know, they have, even their more numerous secondary batteries are huge frickin' cannons. I mean, they're big enough to basically be used on corvettes or even destroyers, sometimes even frigates. Their secondary cannons are oftentimes the big cannons that by those other ships, by the other smaller ones. That's how big these battleships are. And so, you know, I mean, things like their main cannons dwarf things like the 5-inch gun. I mean, they go all the way up to 12, 15. There were even specs of a ship that had a whole 25-inch gun. I mean, I don't know if that's actually been put into service or not. I mean, that's the biggest I could find, given the fact that I'm really been wanting to put this video out. I've done a bit of some scratch surface research, but that's basically what I've been able to find. And that those are big cannons. The 5-inch gun alone is freaking huge. So, yeah, I don't know if the 25-inch gun actually saw the light of day. I couldn't even get the name of it. I just looked up battleship cannon sizes, and that's basically what I came up with. So, anyways, so yeah, that inch is actually the width of the shell. Keep that in mind. That's just, you know, that's the size of the, well, either the width of the shell or the length of the barrel or something. I don't know. They make it so confusing. They measure so many different freaking things. It is so hard to keep track of what is exactly what. Basically, battleships are the slow, aggressive ship. They get right in the middle of everything and they rip everything apart. So, you know, if there's a siege that needs to be broken, or, you know, a blockade that needs to be destroyed, I'm pretty sure a battleship is your go-to ship. So, that's what that is. And now let's go over to dreadnoughts, because I think that's actually quite interesting. So, dreadnoughts are basically battleships given Space Engineer standards, because originally they had to have a certain number of cannons on them, and they had to be really big, and they had to be real fast, they had to be nimble, and to the point where, looking at it, they're just battleships with more guns on them. But looking at Space Engineer specs and standards, they're the same. I mean, Space Engineer's main cannons on those are, well, we have a lot of them, and we can put a lot of them on them. I think that what would really distinguish the difference between a battleship and a dreadnought on Space Engineers is how well known it is, because dreadnought sounds a lot scarier than a battleship. Battleship is like, oh, hey, you sunk my battleship. A dreadnought is more, oh, I am in danger. I do not feel safe. I need to frickin' leave. That's kind of what you think when you hear, oh yeah, the enemy's coming in with a frickin' dreadnought. It has the word dread in it. It is something to be feared. It is something to be dreaded. Hence the word dreadnought. So, I think that how you would classify the difference between a battleship and a dreadnought in Space Engineers is based on its popularity. If your ship is well known enough on a server, if it to the point to where people are scared of it, people know and recognize the name, I think right there you have created a dreadnought. If people know it enough, that is because people fear it enough. And therefore, if it is feared enough, then it is scary, and therefore, because it is scary, it deserves a scarier name other than Battleship, and it should be called a Dreadnought. It is a title that I believe in Space Engineers can very well be earned through combat. It is a title that is earned, not really given or classified. And I'm okay with that. That actually gives quite a challenge for a lot of people on combat-oriented multiplayer servers to create the Dreadnought and to hold that position. So, guys, I mean, I'm willing to see what you all come up with. All right, put down comments below if you guys got a multiplayer server and if you do a lot of combat and you think that there's a Dreadnought in there. Hey, pull up the specs on it on a Steam Workshop and let me take a look at it. All right, I really want to see them. I really want to analyze them. I might do a whole nother video on Dreadnoughts within Space Engineers, you know, by that standard. So, let's go on to our final freaking ship. Let's go on to the carrier, guys. So the carrier, guys, it is the largest ship within any fleet. It is the one that holds entire fighter squadrons, or even holds bombers, transport ships. It is the mother of all mothers. It is the largest ship in the fleet. It is probably the strongest, and it is the most controlling. That's right, guys. The carrier is the one that really controls the entire fight with all of its fighters, capable of holding a lot of small craft with a lot of firepower in large numbers, creating giant swarms against entire ships. It is the go-to. It is the best warship you can possibly create. However, it is also the most expensive. That's why there's so few of them within the world. And quite frankly, I mean, they're just... Do I really need to talk about them? I think we all know what a carrier is. We all know what it is. But I'm gonna keep talking anyways because, you know, I gotta dump more info on this for people who might not be fully aware. So a carrier is anything that can carry entire squadrons of fighters, bombers, transport vehicles, scout ships. They can hold stuff within inside them, and they're the biggest one out there. They are the best for controlling areas, because if there's an area of interest, multiple areas of interest, all you have to do is send out a single fighter, a few fighters, or part of a squadron or a whole squadron out to one area, send another squadron out to another area, because like I said, it holds multiple squadrons within it, and you can control multiple areas at once using those squadrons, and they come back and they refuel. You are basically the ultimate support, the ultimate attack, and the ultimate defense. You do all of those roles far better than what a cruiser could ever do. Problem being is that you're slow, and due to the nature of aircraft carriers, it might take a little while for your ships to get out. It's kind of hard to get them in because, you know, you got to match your speed, your direction with the ship if it's moving or to land and all that stuff. I personally don't like carriers because I've tried using them in a combat situation, and trying to dock in them while it's moving in mid-combat to repair your ship or get a new one is so freaking difficult. That guy who was controlling the entire freaking fleet, he was very avid about, don't just destroy the fighter and then grab a new one. Bring back the destroyed bit so we can scrap it and then build more using less resources. And I gotta say, that he was the hardest guy to work with, because I could barely land them back in that carrier. So any type of fighter I had after that, I used it to its very end. I kamikazed it, and he was not happy about it. But yeah, that's the job of a carrier right there, guys. It is the ship of all ships. It is the ultimate firepower. So I hope you all like this video. Be sure to take care of y'all, and I hope you got some useful information out of this. I know I probably didn't give much of anything, but I figured, hey, you know what, I think that this is something that I could make for whatever reason. I don't know. So y'all take care. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video, guys. Let's get this channel up and going. I'm now at 37 subs. Thank you all for subscribing. Thank you all for taking care. Watch my content. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you all later.